Hello, we're here with Chandra Hampson, who is running for Seattle School Board, position 3. Would you like to go ahead with your 2-minute introduction?
Yes, thank you. Hini karigiwi. That is, it's wonderful to see you all in my language, which is Ho-Chunk. I am from the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, and I'm also Ojibwe from the White Earth Nation. I prefer she, her pronouns. And I live in Northeast Seattle, where my kids attend Sandpoint Elementary and also now Eckstein. I am originally from a reservation community in both Northeastern Oregon and in the place where my tribe is in Nebraska. I grew up and went to school in a public school system in a rural environment. Eventually moved on to get my degree at Stanford University. And following that, followed in the footsteps of my people, which was to contribute to my community, and worked in community development. But then determined that I needed more in order to have an impact in the ways that I wanted to, which brought me up to Seattle to get my MBA at the University of Washington. I wanted to have a skill set that allowed me to have a bigger impact by knowing how capital was flowing in and out of the systems that where I was trying to impact change. I ended up settling down here, marrying my husband, who's from Seattle, and once my kids entered school, I noticed some profound inequities in our system and set about getting very involved and advocating for my school community at Sandpoint Elementary, specifically around issues of racial and economic inequity, but then took that district-wide and for the past year served as the chair of Seattle Council PTSA, and was able to get a broader look at both the district and how it functions and some of the management issues that we have, and also the extent to which those inequities are pervasive throughout the system. And that led me to this place right now where I'm deciding to run for school board.
Great, thank you. Now we'll get started on those questions. You can flip that sheet over, and we'll start with Kelsey.
What steps will you take as a member of the school board to work towards racial equity in our schools?
This is a 1-minute response time.
These are 2 minutes responses. Yep, sorry.
So this has been the driving force for me in my work. In my school, it's 75% non-white students, and what I have done has fallen into 2 primary categories. One is working towards supporting what is now turned into an anti-racist organizational policy, meaning I think that we need to take the profound step as an organization, as Seattle Public Schools, to institutionalize the process of removing the systematic racism that is pervasive in our system. And I think that has to happen as a matter of board policy. And then I've spent much of the last year working directly with the Office of Civil Rights, with the Discipline Department, with the Race and Equity Department, and with the Research and Evaluation Department to determine how does that then flow into specific action on behalf of people in central office and also at the school district level. And that's not just making sure demanding implicit bias training for all of our teachers, hiring more teachers of color. Both of those things are absolutely critical, but also making sure that in our school buildings, that when students walk into the school, they are seen as the absolute gifts and valuable investments that we should see them as, and rather than problems to be solved. Right now, I believe too much of what our children of color experience when they walk into our buildings is they are seen as problems to be solved, and they are shuffled off into so we've taken great steps around trying to eliminate disproportionate discipline, but then we're also still removing them from the educational process, and that needs to stop. And the other big piece of it is around finance. And I don't think that finance should ever, and budget should ever be something that limits us from doing this equity work, which is something I'm very focused on.
Okay, thank you. Hannah, would you like to do the second question?
Well, last spring, many community members and board directors said that the district's enrollment projections were significantly flawed and would lead to large class sizes and unnecessary teacher layoffs at high schools. Last week, those concerns became reality, with large class sizes and overcrowded classrooms at most high schools, which helped fuel student walkouts for equitable I'm like reading from afar, sorry. Yes, with large class sizes and overcrowded classrooms at most high schools, which helped fund, sorry, I'm gonna edit that while I talk, helped fuel student walkouts for equitable funding. What will you do as a board member to ensure the district accurately projects enrollment in the future?
So many of the people that I've gotten to know throughout the Seattle public school system, I have gotten to know specifically around trying to tackle this issue, and it's absolutely astonishing to me that we still are in this terrible place. And if I could pull out the class sizes and the numbers at my school, that we are about to face just horrible overcrowding in classrooms that are filled with 90% low-income students, and we have, that's on top of the fact that we already have all splits in my students' school, which we've just sort of gotten used to. So my kids have been in splits for, you know, the last 3 years. And that's as a result of not having appropriate staffing. So, and I was asked just this afternoon to please come in and talk to the staff and the principals about what are we gonna need to ask for, how are we gonna deal with this again this year. Here we are, year after year we go through this same process. And the best solution that I can say at this point as a future board member is we absolutely have to get in and pull that whole system apart and figure out why this doesn't work year after year after year. I fundamentally do not believe that we can't budget appropriately to make sure that we're not creating these massive swings in our staffing at the beginning of every single year. The district has insisted that that's not possible. The answer is always, this is just the way that it always is. And that's not good enough to me. I think that we have to aim for a much tighter set of projections. That might be that we have to redo the entire way that we project. As far as I know, we're pretty limited to the things that we consider. We need to look at a much broader base of both quantitative and qualitative factors that flow into the system that allows us to project. We need to listen to our schools also.
Thank you. Clayton, would you like to take the next question? Number 3.
Students in special education continue to not receive the education that they are morally and legally entitled to. How would you ensure that students, educators, including paraprofessionals, and schools are supported, both with policy and funding?
This is not just a hill that we have to climb, this is a mountain in terms of special education funding. I do believe in my communication with our state legislators that there is significant appetite to increase funding for special education, because it's not just about what the district has figured out how to be legally compliant without really providing full service to our special education students. We don't have, the fact that our paraprofessionals are given the task with the least amount of training and career path support, are given the most important tasks in our classrooms, is something that I think as a school community, as a district community, we need to look at turning that on its head and asking ourselves, why are we not giving our special education students the most qualified staff? Why are they not getting the best that we have to offer? And then giving our paraprofessionals opportunities to teach a little more broadly and put them on a career path to becoming certificated teachers. That makes a lot more sense to me, and I think we need to work very closely with our state legislators to see how do we fund that as a different model. But we definitely need to insist that the amount of education, special education that we're providing, first of all in Seattle, is fully funded, but then also that we are actually able to start to, the things that I hear about the most when in campaigning, dyslexia, which we all have directly experienced and seen is true in our classrooms, and then children with autism who are not getting services that they need in our classrooms. And those are 2 massive groups of students that we're currently failing. I've had some heartbreaking conversations with parents who basically have said, unless you're gonna just shut the whole thing down, I don't wanna talk to you, because their experience with their special education student has been so bad, and we need to do much better.
Thank you. Matt, question 4?
It's another three-parter.
3-point question.
What factors would you weigh, and how would you decide to alter attendance boundaries and determine the population that will attend school? Right now, for example, Robert Eagle's staff is incredibly overcrowded, while Whitman Middle School is far under capacity. How would you address situations like this? The superintendent seems to be advocating for Licton Springs K-8 to be moved away from its current site. Do you support the superintendent's plan?
So I'll address, okay, Liz. The first two, and leave, the second one. My kids go to a school that is there's only 189 students, in the elementary school that my youngest goes to. My oldest just started middle school, in what used to be a heavily overcrowded, middle school. And, for the life of me, I have heard of families over and over again being turned away from our school who want to opt in. The wait list that they've created for our school doesn't make any sense at all. I don't understand why we have it. So I think we had at some point gotten to a place of moving those wait lists. I think that there's been talk of eliminating those wait lists. And then you have to start looking at the attendance boundaries. I think it actually goes into the second question, which is around enrollment projections. And if you're not having real conversations in community about these decisions are being made in a black box using, software systems and sort of proprietary projection tools that are not connected to the things that are actually happening in our school communities. And that really has to stop. It's got to start to be connected to what is actually happening in the communities and what people in the communities want for their schools and what they see for their school boundaries. We saw that with Olympic Hills had to fight like hell to get their school to be maintained as it was, and it's an amazing community. They shouldn't have even had to go through all that trouble. That should have been just an immediate connection to that community. As far as the advocating for Licton Springs K-8 to be moved to its current site, that's the end of a series of really bad mistakes that the district made with respect to that particular community. I have so many friends that have left that community that never wanted to, and at this point, I think we kind of need to start from scratch there. Do I think the superintendent's plan is the way to go? Probably not, but it needs to be something different. Sorry for going over.
All right, follow-ups. Alice, and then Matt, and then Summer.
My question is gonna be related to Licton Springs anyway, so I can let you have a little bit more time, but how do you think that equity, consideration should play a role in the decisions that are being made about that site?
Specifically about Licton Springs?
About Licton Springs, yeah.
So, I have to respond to that as a Native parent, and the people that I'm very, very close to some are staying, and their kids are like my kids. I care about their success, and they've been just doing horribly in that environment. There was never a commitment by the district to truly make it a Native themed school, meaning it wasn't, it ended up being controlled from a sort of cultural standpoint, not by the core Native community that was there, and instead by others. And so, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had a time limit on this. So I think that it would need to be reconstructed specifically in direct consultation with the Native families that were there and that are still there, and to determine what is feasible in a geographic and transportation scenario like what we have, to make something like that desirable, and then figure out how to include others that might want to be part of that. Instead, it was sort of became something I think it was never intended to be.
Thank you. Matt, and these are 1 minute.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So going back to IEP and 504 plans, what role do you think student self-advocates have in advocating for their own, being a part of their own IEP and 504 plans? And when do you think they should start being part of that process?
I think they should start, I think that, connected to what I said before about special education, I believe that much of what we have to learn that's important in education is actually connected to how we create space for learners that have things like IEPs and 504. So I have a child with a 504, and I have been terrified of even putting that to work in the school system because I know what the pitfalls and what the issues have been for so many other parents. And yet, out of that has come this incredible tool called an individualized education plan. Sabrina Berg, who's one of my closest colleagues in this work, said to me, what if you had an individualized education plan when you were a student? And how would that have changed your experience? And when she said that to me, I realized that is what it should look like. Every student should be, the minute that they come into school and they have any ability to start to formulate what does their education plan look like, they should be included in that process, and they should, it's very consistent for me with my native culture, they should be part of determining what that looks like for them, and they should always be at the center of that. And I think that's a model for every student.
Great, thank you. Summer?
So if elected, would you maintain the Seattle Public Schools' current policy of opposing new charter schools? And would you advocate against privatization and corporate control in our district, and how would you do that?
So, yes, is the short answer. The caveat that I give, and I don't know that this is something that so that the Indian Education Association supports charter schools, and I have to honor that because those schools are generally in reservation communities where there has never been an opportunity. So the reservation where I first went to school, we were bused into town, and it wasn't until charter schools became a possibility that then the reservation was actually able to get funding to have a school in its own community. That being said, I think the industry is something that I do think it's an industry, and I think it's made up of a lot of bottom feeders that try to provide services to these charter schools, and I want nothing to do with that. But I can't deny that there have been opportunities for very specific cultural communities where it has been an absolute lifesaver. But as far as the industry goes, I would continue to oppose it.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions, Kelsey?
So circling back on your response to question 3, where you mentioned special education and that you wanted to have the most qualified staff, obviously in those positions. How do you think that you, if you were to get elected, have an equity lens on every decision that you would make from the school board perspective?
Could you provide a tiny bit more
How would you
clarity
bring
about that?
equity into every
Oh,
choice
just in
that you
general.
make?
That's pretty inherently my lens in everything that I do. My entire career has been designed around trying to create equity in my community, specific to the Native community, but also my community wherever I am at the time. All of my work in my community around Sandpoint and Magnuson Park has been about how to insert, what does equity look like in this situation? I think that everyone can improve. I still have to remind myself of times when I am depending on what I would call a colonized mind frame to make decisions. Seattle Public Schools was created 12 years after the last Native community was pushed out of the city. And so it wasn't designed for everyone. And so it's a matter of just being consistent and clear, and always asking that question of what is the equity lens. We have some good tools in the system, and I think it's just a matter of making sure that we actually are using them every time we're making a decision.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before? Matt, one more and then we'll wrap up.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up to Summer's question. So you gave a good example of good uses of charters in rural education. but speaking specifically about Seattle.
Not in rural education, specifically in tribal
Reservations,
communities.
right.
Yeah.
But specifically in Seattle, in the geographic confines of Seattle, do you think there should be any charter schools?
I don't, as the industry is right now, no. I don't, but there are, right now, there's Ashe Academy, and I know people who have sent their kids to that school. They're African-American parents who have run out of options. And so I wouldn't wanna deny them that opportunity. So you have to make just systematic decisions, right? So as a system, my systematic decision would always be anti-charter school. And yet I would want to find a way, within that, we have to say, how do we support alternative forms of education for communities that are so far from educational justice? That we still can't provide an opportunity where they can even walk in the door and not know that a teacher's gonna call 911 on them when they're 11 years old. So it's kind of a both and type of question. Again, I don't like the system the way that it is, and I wouldn't support it. But we have to find other ways to support community schools like mine on our reservation, and like Ashe Academy, which is, I think the only other alternative is homeschooling in those situations.
Thank you. All right. If you would like to take 30 seconds for a wrap up, you may go ahead.
I really appreciate everybody's time. I know these are long evenings. I really believe that I'm well primed to take on this leadership role. We are at a critical point in terms of leadership in our school district. We have, I think, kind of a crisis of leadership amongst the staff at Seattle Public Schools. I have very grave concerns about where we're headed. And I believe that over my career and my years of advocacy, I've built up a set of skills that will allow me not only to be effective as a leader, but also in bringing other people together to work through these really, really hard issues and ask the really hard questions. And I would be honored to have your endorsement.